Hi, students, and welcome to today's live IELTS class. My name is Adrian. I'm streaming to you from beautiful Budapest here. I hope everybody has had a great week and is looking forward to a fantastic weekend. Hi, Carolina. Hi, Barendra, Amrit, Rashika, Nikhil. Good to see many of our members. Gagan, Shub Sharat, Mashia, Sarabpreet. Nice to see Kawal. Nice to see many of our regular members in the class. Students, we are practicing IELTS reading today. We're going to talk about how to achieve a Band 9 score in the reading section. A couple of really important points to pay attention to. And these materials are presented to you by aehelp.com for academic IELTS success. Please check us out there. For the general IELTS, please visit us at IELTShelp.com. That's generalieltshelp.com. On both of our websites, we have lots and lots of materials to help you improve for the reading section as well as other parts of the IELTS test. Just quickly show you that. This is the academic web portal here at aehelp.com with the blue background. Click that big red button to join there. And for the general IELTS, it's the green background, same kind of layout. Click that big red button to join us there. Of course, we have apps to support our websites that have our materials also, so you can learn on the go. Academic IELTS Help from your Google Play or Apple app stores. Link it to your web account, aehelp.com. Or General IELTS Help app will link to your gieltshelp.com account. If you have questions, just send me an email, adrian@aehelp.com. If you want to get our exam books, get them from Amazon. Search Amazon for AEhelp's Academic IELTS or G-Help's General IELTS. Tiger World, glad to see you in class as well. Thanks for the shout out. Okay, everyone, so reading today. Tomorrow, members, we will have a task 1, and then we'll have a speaking part 3 for everyone. Today, we're going to read this passage here. Causes of the American economic crisis. So maybe the last big crisis before the current COVID crisis was the economic crisis. Some of you probably remember back in 2008. And of course, that domino started with the economic crisis in the US. We even have this picture here. What is this picture about? What is this picture and this title telling us here? What will happen here? Moria says it's the recession of 2008. Anybody, what do we remember about that? Some of you might have been quite young at that time, but it definitely affected your parents and a lot of people. Abhishek says stock prices. Yeah, this is a stock price table here from some stock exchange. There was a lot of unemployment, Moria. Yeah, that's right. A lot of people lost their jobs, of course. The market shares crashed. Yeah. Kawal, I'm not sure what you mean by that. It's unfamiliar to me. Yeah. Romaine says it was the subprime crisis. Yeah, that's exactly what it was, Romaine. So when you read the title of a passage and you look at a picture, you should think as much as possible about that topic so that you can collect information that you have as much as possible. If you don't have a lot of information, that's okay. But to get a high band score, to get a band 9, you can only make one mistake out of all of the 40 questions. Okay? Anas, it's not the Great Depression. That would be jumping back to the 1930s. Okay, so it's not the Great Depression. That's a different economic crisis in the world. All right. What caused it? Anybody remember what the cause of that crisis was? What was the biggest reason or what started that crisis globally that dragged the American dollar and then, of course, a lot of the other economies around the world followed? What actually led to that? Some of you probably remember, I guess. So what was the root cause of this? It wasn't the World Trade Center. It wasn't the corona effect. Yeah, Abhishek says it was bank loans. Yeah, so money wasn't paid back. A lot of loans were given out. So the banks gave a lot of loans, and those loans were not paid back because there was no ability to pay back those loans. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that was a big reason. And then the banks got into trouble and the banks failed, right? Okay, so before we read the questions or look at the questions in the passage more, just a couple of important notes on what's important to score a band 9. So, you know, some students are like, I want to get a band 9 on IELTS. I think I can. I have good English. I think I can get a band 9. Okay, so what's important for getting a band 9? Okay, well, simply put, one of the first steps that's important is use correct strategies for fluent, active reading. Okay, so that's kind of the big answer, right? So read fluently, read actively. Okay, and for a lot of people who are not sure about this, have to read the whole passage to get a band 9. I can basically say it's impossible to get a band 9 unless it's like winning the lottery where you just get super, super lucky, but nobody ever sits an exam the same way that you play the lottery. So you have to read the whole passage to get a band 9. And to get a band 9, you need to understand at least 90% of the passage. Okay, that is really, really important as well. Okay, so you do have to have a lot of understanding of the passage. So to get a band 9, those are all kind of important steps. Okay, and of course, you must be able to interpret the passage, meaning digest the information, and use good critical thinking to analyze questions. Okay, so you have to be good at all of these. All right. Mohammed, if you can't read the whole passage, it's very unlikely that you can get a band 9 or even a band 8. Okay, so I'm just, really honestly, students, you might be able to get a band 7 if you don't read the whole passage. You very unlikely will get anything higher than that if you don't read the whole passage. Again, teachers who teach IELTS, I promise you that if they sit the IELTS exam, they will read the whole passage before they give the answers. Even if they teach students to just skim and scan, I don't think any teacher will ever actually just skim and scan the passage in the IELTS. So one of the important points that we believe in when we teach our students, and this includes all of our lessons in AAHelp.com and GIELTShelp.com, is we never tell students to use strategies that the teacher would not use, okay? And I don't think any IELTS teacher would honestly tell you that they would sit the IELTS exam and do the reading passage by just skimming and scanning for answers. And if they do, I don't think that teacher would get a band 9, okay? All right, that's just the reality of it, all right? So I wouldn't teach you to drive a car in a way that I don't believe in driving a car. Just the same, I wouldn't teach you to do IELTS in a way that I wouldn't do IELTS, okay? All right. District Daughter says you won't have enough time to read the whole passage. Yes, you will. Students, again, talking about time, this passage, if we look at it, it's close to 2 pages. This passage for an average upper intermediate English level student shouldn't take more than 10 minutes to read maximum, okay? You have 20 minutes for each passage. If it takes you 18 minutes or 15 minutes to read a passage like this, you have to improve your reading speed in English. It's that simple because you will not be able to do professional work or school, university, college, if it takes you 15 minutes to read 2 pages. Keep in mind that the average university student, okay, so I'll make a note of this so you're aware, the average student in Canada, US, UK, Australia, the average full-time universities, Canada, UK, US, is expected to read 120 to 180 pages each week. And you're not just expected to read the 120 to 150 pages each week, but also you are expected to be tested on that. Okay, just give me a second. I'll try to adjust the sound. Okay. If my voice is still cracking, let me know. I just adjusted that. Okay, if there's still a sound problem, just let me know, and I'll adjust it. Okay, I'm looking at what you're telling me. Okay. All right. Again, you're expected to read 120 to 150 pages each week. Just do the math. If you're reading, let's say, 150 pages, and your average speed is 7 minutes per page, you are reading for 1,050 minutes. That's too much. Okay? So in a week, okay, in 1 week, all right? So if it takes you that long, then you need to improve your speed of reading. Remember, students, we're focusing on how to get a band 9 here. All right, and so without, badgering you too much about this, okay? In university, at least half a book per week. At least half a book per week in the US, UK for universities, Canada as well. I remember my university days like they were yesterday. 5 courses, 1 chapter per course per week. Each chapter averaged 30 minutes. Oh, and by the way, the pages in university books are much larger than these pages. Okay, so it's almost like 2 of these pages. It's not to scare you. It's just to give you a snapshot of reality. Okay. All right. So we read the title. Let's get back to this. So, causes of the American economic crisis. We think about as much information as we can. So we have the stock markets here. Obviously, there's something about the losing of money, maybe something about banks, people losing money. Okay. So then we go, all right, well, I have a little bit of an idea, so I'm going to go look at the questions, see if any questions can help me understand this passage a little bit more. Okay. So we look at the yes, no, not given, and we go, okay, so here I don't know which one of these is a no. I don't know which one of these is a not given, so I don't read that. Okay, that's a waste of time to read it before the passage. All right. Then I have a complete each sentence with the correct ending, A to F. So I look here and I see, okay, there's 3 questions, and I have 6 choices. That means half of these are wrong. So I don't read the choices, but I know that this information is in the text. So banks have a responsibility. Keywords, banks, responsibility. So something about banks' responsibility is in the passage. Okay, each bank is responsible for, okay, I have bank and responsible again. So obviously this is an important point in the passage. And then recession is started when? Okay, recession, that's important. Hopefully I know the meaning of the word recession. Okay, hopefully. All right. Okay, so banks, responsibility, recession, those are some good tips to help me. Let's see if we have some more questions. Great. Here we have a summary using the list of words. I don't worry about the list of words, but I'm going to look at the summary because that's going to help me. The title of the summary is The American Government's Role. Okay, so I see something about banks and now something about governments. Okay, so banks and governments are going to be important here. All right. Okay, so I'm going to read this quickly. I'm not going to try to understand every word or pronounce every word. I'm just going to read it quickly. Read with me. This is a reading class, students, so make sure to read with me. And if you can, read aloud. Read so you can hear yourself. Okay? All right, here we go. It is the American government which is arguably most responsible for the economic crisis. In order to properly, people must be sheltered from possible problems created by. Regulation is required in any society in order to coerce people into acting for the benefit of. Government is in place to serve its citizens, and in this case, it has failed. Apologists will say that the recession is just on the radar of American supremacy, while others say that such bumps on the road are serious problems. Regulation is the solution to the problem, but the American of independence and small government will be very difficult to crack. Okay, and then I have question 40, multiple choice. I don't worry about the answers because I don't know which one is correct. Which of the following phrases best describes the main aim of reading passage 3? So this is reading passage 3. It's virtually impossible to skim. Here I'm reminded about that. So this question is asking about the main aim, so the main goal of this passage. You cannot answer this kind of question by just skimming the passage. Okay, you can't explain what the main aim of a passage is by quickly skimming through it. Very difficult anyway. Okay. All right. So now we have a little more of an idea. So let's read this passage and then we will answer the questions. And I'll show you a good strategy to follow while you're reading so that you can have the best chance to give correct answers. And this is practicing active reading. Okay, so we're going to start with paragraph 1. And for each paragraph, we're going to summarize and visualize the main point of the paragraph. Okay, so this is a skill that you need to practice all the time. All right, so here we go. Read with me. Causes of the American economic crisis. When discussing the causes of the late 2000s American subprime mortgage crisis, it is easy to lay all the blame on the banks. But it is incorrect to claim innocent the individual home buyers involved, as well as the American government as a whole. Very important. Okay, so banks, individual home buyers, and American government. That's really important here. There are many instances in the years leading up to the crisis where moral obligations failed to be met. For the home buyers, it is a case of ignoring a scenario which was, upon deeper inspection, too good to be true. For the bankers, it was falling prey to their own laissez-faire loaning policies, lending without giving much interest to the mandates required of the borrower. For the government, it was instituting such a laissez-faire system in the first place, free of regulatory checks and balances. What is this paragraph about? So here, reading actively, I would visualize that I'm the one who wants to buy a house. I'm in the United States, it's 2006, and I've got an okay job, but I want a really nice house on the beach in California. It cost me $1 million. I go to the bank and I say, hey, John, I need $1 million for this house. And I have an okay job. I work as a mechanic. I make $50 an hour. Can I buy this house? And he goes, yeah, sure. Here's the $1 million. No problem. Okay. and then suddenly I lose the house, I lose the money, and it's game over. Okay? So what is it about? Koala says, who is responsible? Yeah. So the responsibility for the economic crisis. That's right. Okay. So Anas says, who's to blame and who's not to blame for the economic crisis? OIS, very good. Determining responsibility of the crisis. OIS, really nice, concise answer. Take a look at what OIS says. OIS says, determine the responsibility for the crisis. Perfect. Rajveer says responsibility for the crisis. That's it. So now you're visualizing this. Was it my fault? Was it the bank? Was it the government? Whose fault is it that I bought my $1 million home on the beach in California and I couldn't afford to pay? Okay? So whose fault is it? Mine, the bank's, or the government's? Let's keep reading. So that's what it's going to be about, and I'm sure it's going to explain that. I'm sure it's going to explain the person, and then the bank, and then the government, because that's a logical way to write the essay, from small to big. Small, the individual, the person. Medium-sized, the bank. The big fish, the government, right? Organizing the essay in this way makes sense. Okay, so think about it. IELTS test creators, they're professional writers. They write in an effective, standard way. So you can predict the essay structure if you think like they think. Okay? All right. Here we go. Read with me. If a person falls prey to an email scam, the blame is deservedly placed on the hapless person. Society feels pity for them, but nobody feels the government should reimburse the individual for their lack of caution. The person in this scenario has affected no one but themselves. If a person falls prey to a too good to be true subprime mortgage and ends up bankrupt, he or she is not just hurting themselves, they are also hurting society, because that debt inevitably rests with the populace. Thus, while a person has no social responsibility to act a certain way in the case of the email scam, a person does have a social obligation when it comes to actions that can hurt society, such as taking on a subprime mortgage. The counter argument here is that people perceive banks as possessing a certain level of trustworthiness, and that it is unreasonable to expect people to have their too good to be true radar active when dealing with banks. Nevertheless, people do have an ethical obligation to be aware of pitfalls, and being told it's okay by trustworthy institutions is simply not a sufficient excuse. Okay, so what is this paragraph about? If you had to summarize this in a few words, what would you say? In this case, I'm visualizing myself borrowing $1 million for my California beach home, and when I don't pay the bank back, my neighbor loses their job. My neighbor John, my good friend who works with me at the same mechanic shop as I do, now they lost their job too. Why? Because the business had to close because there's not enough money for the bank to support the business that we work for. So Fennel says it's the responsibility of the individual. Yeah, and Fennel, maybe just one more step further. Okay, Sam says, Sam Katnoria says, whom to trust? Yeah. Very good. So Rajveer says it's a person's actions impacting society. Yeah. Carolina, your responsibility with a situation that's too good to be true where you impact society. Yeah. Mahi, very good. So Mahi says it's the responsibility of an individual for society. Yeah. So when we borrow $1 million from the bank and we don't pay that back, we're not just hurting ourselves. I think a lot of people feel that way, but we're actually hurting society because that money is taken from other parts of society, right? Very good. Okay, let's keep going. Here we go. Banks have a responsibility to protect their customers and to look out for the general economic health of not just their company, but of the entire industry. The American banks failed in these considerations in each of these regards. First, They offered mortgages to millions of ill-qualified buyers who were clearly not going to be able to fulfill the requirements of the mortgage to make the loans viable. Individual lenders acted selfishly, exploiting very relaxed lending policies to benefit their own finances. Second, banks failed to look after the health of their own companies. This is not a failure of individual bankers, but a failure of those in management positions. Many U.S. companies that need a multi-billion-dollar bailout are an unmitigated disaster. Although this failure falls more in line with the email scam, that is to say, a failure which is not a social failure, but a business failure, the social failure lies in the bank's obligation to the entire industry and the economy as a whole. Each bank is responsible for a small piece of the economic pie. If one bank fails, it appears as a blip on the radar. However, with each individual failure, the threshold for failure for the remaining companies is lowered. It is in this sense that companies have a moral obligation to do good business, because if they do not, they raise the chances of bankruptcy for each of their competitors and the economy as a whole. Eventually, the threshold of failure is so low that almost all lending has to cease and a recession is ignited. Okay. So what is this paragraph about? So now I'm kind of thinking about myself at the bank, talking to my banker, and my banker going, yeah, of course, here's that $1 million, take it, and hey, tell your friend Tim to come in too. I got another $1 million for them as well. So Afolabi says it's the bank's responsibility and obligation towards the economy. Yes. Fennel says it's the lending and loan of different banks lacking. Yep, there's some there as well. I'm still looking for the best answer. Demita, very good. So Demita David says it's the obligation of the bank to the industry and the customer, right? So that would be this paragraph summarized as the responsibility of the bank to the industry, to the customer, and its failure in the American economic crisis for these, right? Yeah, Krishna, very good. Banks' negligence with customers and the banking industry. So Krishna Chetri, if you add and the industry or the finance industry, you've got the perfect summary. Banks' negligence with customers and the finance industry. Okay. All right, let's do this. So let's read the next one. I'm guessing it's going to be about the government. So here we go. In this investigation of blame placing, arguably the body who holds the most responsibility is the American government. The truth is that if people are not protected from themselves by the government, society cannot function well. The wholly free market is akin to an economic version of Hobbes' state of nature. People acting like tigers and bears trying to get at each other's money. Society does not work optimally when it pays overwhelming dividends for people to act selfishly. It takes regulation and economic policy to force people into acting in society's best interest. One of the duties of a government is to protect its citizens from each other, and in this case, the American government has failed catastrophically. Defenders of the free market will claim that this recession is simply a temporary bump in the road for what is arguably the greatest economic power in world history. They will claim that the free market is in the best interest of everyone, despite its rather unsightly undercarriage. In response, it can be argued that the bumps in the road are symptomatic of a system in need of healing by means of regulation. Unfortunately, American culture is such that any regulation is seen as government interference in private affairs, and such intervention conflicts with American ideals. Economics is not the only arena where this belief system is played out. Americans continue to allow their poorest citizens to live without proper health care, and they put the burden of the cost of higher education directly on students. Many European countries fully subsidize higher education. Until this distaste for government intervention is cast aside, events like the subprime mortgage crisis will continue to occur, whether they are merely bumps on the economic road or signs of forthcoming systemic collapse. In both cases, the government has failed to fulfill their role to save the citizens from themselves. In regard to subprime mortgages, regulation of banking is like an insurance policy for the economy. It may lower profits, insurance policies cost money, but it smooths out the bumps in the road. As long as the American government continues to turn a blind eye to these insurance policies, they will continue to put the social well-being of its citizens at risk. Whew, long paragraph, lots to follow there about the government, but if you visualize, if you picture it and take it step by step, you can create a clear picture of what this paragraph is really saying. Okay? So Fennell says it's the strict regulation of governments on the banking system. Fennell, not quite, but you have the right sphere of idea. Okay. Learn English. You have to read more. You have to work on your reading fluency. Read regularly. Okay. Alex says it's the government's, U.S. government's. I'm going to read that because it was looking good, Alex. I just have to find it again. Let me see it. Alex says it's the U.S. government's intervention in the private sector and its after effects in the economy. Yeah, Alex, one missing word, the lack of U.S. government intervention in the private sector and its effects in the economy. Yeah, that would be a very good way to say it, okay? But it's not the U.S. government's intervention, it's the lack of intervention, okay? Rajveer says it's the government's failure in handling monetary policies. Yeah, absolutely. That's what it's about. Okay, so now I have a pretty good idea, okay? So in the beginning, the introduction told me about who's responsible, individual, bank, government. And then in body 1, 2, 3, it basically explained to me why the individual is responsible, why the bank is responsible, and how and why the government should be responsible. Okay, so hopefully I got that information. And now I can answer the questions with some good strategies. So here we have yes, no, not given. It's a yes if the statement agrees with the writer. It's a no if the statement is opposite of what the writer is saying. And it's not given if we can't really tell if the writer would agree or disagree with that statement. Okay, that's how you have to think about it. All right. Now there's some really logical steps to yes, no, not given and true, false, not given. First, you have to figure out, is it given or is it not given? Okay, so don't try to figure out if it's not given, true or false, or yes or no, but first just try to figure out if it's given or if it's not given. The way to do that is to figure out if this information belongs in the passage or does not belong in the passage. The way to do that is to think about it as, is it important for the passage or not? Tiger World is saying that, yeah. One way to the 700 words, right? So is it important for this topic, for this essay? Okay. So those that fall for common scams deserve to be compensated by society. So is it important to know that people who fall for everyday scams, tricks, and lose their money deserve to get money back from society? OIS says it's not important. Now, remember, OIS, we're talking about individual responsibility. So this is dealing with the controlling idea of individual responsibility. So it is important, right? Because the passage talks about individual responsibility. So does the author think that a person who falls for an everyday scam or a trick deserves to be compensated? So it's given because it's dealing with individual responsibility. Okay? And Romain says no. The author says they shouldn't be. Remember the email scam? So that was very visual. Somebody says, you won the lottery, just send us $50 and we'll send you $2 million. Oh, great. Okay, my neighbor should give me back the $50 because I was foolish and I sent it to this company. No, the IELTS won't lie. So if you don't think it's true, the author won't think it's true. The answer is no. Okay? Does that make sense? So I read this. I figured out if it's given or not given. I realized that this information is dealing with individual responsibility. And then I realized that no, it's not true because the author says that, society doesn't have to repay a person who loses their money because they go into a casino and put all their money on Black 8. Okay. All right. Number 28, many homeowners are too young and irresponsible. So again, I want to figure out given or not given. So is it important to know the age? So the focus is too young, so it's the age of people who buy the home, given or not given. Is it important to know the age of the people who are buying their house? So Abhishek says it's not important, it's too much detail, plus it doesn't really matter. If I buy a house for $1 million when I'm 60, or if I buy it when I'm 20 and I can't pay back the money, it doesn't really matter, right? So why would the author talk about that? So this one is not given. Okay. So far, so good. So here, I don't even need to go to the is it true, is it not true. In fact, a lot of students find the not givens really difficult and challenging. Ironically, when you figure out how to answer the not given questions, they're one of the easiest questions because they're quick. You don't have to search, you don't have to read, you just figure out that it's not given. You don't have to think about is it true or is it not true. You just write not given and then you can move on. Okay? Karen, can you please switch to English in the chat so I don't have to put you on timeout? English class, right? Let's use English, okay? Especially in IELTS, which is intermediate to advanced English, okay? So let's use English, all right? Don't distract other students. It's probably not fair, right? Okay, so number 29, society trusts the banking system, okay? Again, given or not given? Is it important to know about the trust for the banking system? This has to do with banks' responsibility, right? So yeah, absolutely, Abhishek, absolutely, Rajveer. It's important, right? So this is going to be important. So it's important. So here we have to figure out whether it's true or not. So it's given. So the second step is true or false, or in this case, yes or no. Okay. So does society trust the banking system? Do you trust the banking system? If you have money in the bank, I hope you do. So if you don't have money in the bank, maybe you don't, but anybody who has money in the bank, hopefully you trust the banking system. If you don't, take your money out. That's my suggestion, right? Invest it somewhere else. So yeah, society trusts the banking system. So this would be a yes. Okay. All right. Rohan says, I have money in the bank and I don't. Isn't that weird? I think many of us, Rohan, would agree with you. We have money in the bank, but we don't trust the bank. How does that make sense? All right. Let's keep going. Home buyers have an ethical obligation to beware of trustworthy institutions. So again, is this given or is it not given? Is this dealing with individual, bank, or government responsibility? Is it dealing with that? Yeah, absolutely it is. This question is also dealing with individual responsibility. Home buyers are individuals. Ethical obligations are responsibility. Okay. So from that, I can figure out that it's going to be given. Okay. And homebuyers have an ethical obligation to beware of trustworthy institutions. Is it true? So should we be kind of like, you're going to give me $1 million even though I can't pay you back? I should be a little bit careful about that, right? You're going to give me a credit card with $20,000 at 20% interest when I can't pay back that interest? I should be a little bit careful. So it's given, right? Is it true? Yeah, absolutely, right? When a deal seems too good to be true, you should always think about that twice. You should always think, maybe it's not right. Okay? So no, not given, yes, yes. Those are the answers, okay? Logic and reading the passage is the way to answer yes, no, not given quickly. Skimming and scanning is very slow and very inaccurate for yes, no, not given questions. You simply cannot skim read for not given, right? It's not possible. You end up reading the passage like 4 times. In all honesty, students, many candidates who take the IELTS exam and tell me that they don't have enough time to read the passage, when I'm seeing how they do the test, I actually see that they skim read each passage like 3 times. And then I ask them like, hey, if you didn't skim read the passage 2 or 3 times searching for the answers, are you sure you couldn't read the passage just once normally and then skim read less? And many students are like, oh yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe if I don't skim read for 10 minutes over and over and over again, I could just read the passage. Right? Maybe. Try it. If you're one of those people that's panicking and skim reading all over the place, try reading it. Okay? You might be surprised. All right? Okay, Demita, I just did, so maybe you joined late. Okay, check it out. All right, so here, let's try to answer these. So the way to do this kind of finishing with the correct sentence ending is to finish on your own and then to figure out the perfect match or the closest match. Okay, all right, so that's the way to do it. All right. So here, number 31, banks have a responsibility to. What do banks have a responsibility to? From reading the passage, what do we have? What do banks have a responsibility to? Okay. Carolina says to protect their customers. That's one. I remember that. So they have a responsibility to protect their customers. What else? Kawal says check customer info. Yeah, kind of. So OS says protect the customers. Yeah. And there's another big one that they're talking about. Fennel says to make sure that their loans are viable. Yeah. Follow lending policy. Barendra says personal data. I don't know if there's much about that, Barendra. I think you're confusing it with the last class. Yeah, very good. So Rajveer says to safeguard other banks. Yeah, so what I got from reading this is that banks have a responsibility for their customers and for other banks, right? For their neighbors, for their other banks. Okay, okay, so let's see if there's something that matches. Now, pay attention to these prepositions, okay, and words that are joining, because that will help to figure out the right one. Okay, so banks have a responsibility to the breathing room. Nope, to the breathing room doesn't make sense. Banks have a responsibility to reassure the people that it is okay to borrow money. Maybe. Doesn't seem to match information in the passage, but maybe. Banks have a responsibility to instructing their employees to lend. Nope, definitely not. Banks have a responsibility to their small part of the. Nope. To their small part of the. Nope. Banks have a responsibility to protect the industry they are a part of. That looks really good. Banks have a responsibility to the banks have to receive. No. Okay. So these kinds of questions, they have to make grammatical sense, and they have to be a correct sentence when they're put together. So because of that, I know that this and this are impossible. Okay. This is awkward writing as well. So this one, this one, this one, and logically, this one's kind of weird. This one's kind of weird as well. E is the best match. It has the best grammatical match as well. So E is going to be my correct answer here. Okay, and I can see that many of you gave that. Okay, that was very clear. So to the other banks. OS is asking, can I just use grammar to find the correct answer? Probably not, OS. There will usually be at least two that will grammatically match. Okay. So you can't use just grammar, but you can use grammar to at least eliminate a couple of the answers. Okay. All right. So, E, yeah. Let's go to the next one, 32. Each bank is responsible for. What is each bank responsible for? They're responsible for their customers. Make sure this for the safety of the money, sure. Okay. Note, freelancer, we definitely read the passage. That was key to getting these answers. Okay. All right. Rashika says it's B. So Afalabi says responsibly for other banks. Yeah. Okay, I think that works. So for other banks or for the economy. Okay. I can read these again. For the breathing room for failure, no. For reassure the people, doesn't make grammatical sense. For instructing their employees to lend to ill-qualified buyers, that's really strange. That's probably not going to be an answer for anything. For their small part of the big economic picture. So banks are responsible for their small part of the big economic picture. That looks really good. For the banks have to receive a bailout. That doesn't make sense. D definitely looks like the right answer. So I'm going to go with D. Okay. And then number 33, a recession is started when? Okay. Anybody remember when a recession is started? Okay, so when is a recession started? How does a recession start? So what happens when money suddenly loses value and people lose their jobs? How does that happen? How does recession usually start? It was very clear in the passage. Moira says when banks loan to ill-qualified buyers, that's possible. Yeah, Makbul says when there's no liquidity in the bank. Okay, yeah, so when the bank is no longer able to loan money. Okay. Everything in the channel, we're using our exam book 1. So academic IELTS help exam book 1. Okay. So here, the breathing room for failure is so low that lending has to stop. If we stop lending, recession is started. So the correct answer is A. If banks are no longer able to loan money, that leads to recession, because that means we have to use the money that we have, and that devalues money very quickly. Okay. All right. Very good. Nicely done. All right, so now we have this filling in the blanks. Same way, we try to figure out or think of the answer on our own, and then we find the match. Okay. These are actually quite fast. So this type of question can be a lot faster than true, false, not given, or this matching the sentence ending. Okay. All right, here we go. So it is the American government which is arguably most responsible for the economic crisis. In order to something properly, people must be sheltered from possible problems created by. So in order to what properly? What do you think would go in there in this passage. So in order to something properly, people must be sheltered. More it says function properly. Yeah, I think function or work properly, something like that. Yeah, absolutely. Let's see if there's a word like that in there. Is function in there? Yeah, so in order to function properly, I would agree. Work or function. Work and function are kind of synonyms. You won't see both in the choices. Which one is it? Okay. It's in there. If you have the perfect match, go with it. Okay. Don't choose anything different. So in order to function properly, yep, people must be sheltered from possible problems created by something. Okay. What is it created by? So what are the problems created by? Okay, so what's creating the problem with this passage in mind? So problems created by banks, maybe, by the recession, that could be possible as well. If you're not sure, read the next sentence. So regulation is required in any society in order to coerce people into acting for the benefit of. So people must be sheltered from possible problems created by maybe society. Okay, so banks, society, something like that. Here we go. Everyone, popularity, blip, desires, signs, borrow, themselves, culture, function, government. Which one do you think makes the most sense or is the closest? I don't think culture creates the problems. Okay, so let's say you say, okay, it could be D, themselves, could be F, culture, could be J, government, okay, or it could be G, desires, okay, you're not sure. Put them all in, try them all out, okay, so themselves, culture, desire, governments. So in order to function properly, people must be sheltered from possible problems created by themselves, by culture. That's kind of weird. By governments, people must be sheltered from possible problems created by governments. Maybe. Now, you could put governments and themselves in there for now. So you could say, okay, I'm going to put themselves and governments. Desires is a bit awkward, so I'm going to go with themselves and governments for now. So D and J. Okay. And then I'm going to keep going, and if one of these fits better into another one of these spaces, then I can remove that, and I can figure out which one is accurate. Okay, so I can deduce that. All right. Now, remember, it's a summary for the American government's role. Okay, so another way I can figure this out is I can go back to that paragraph and I can check. So people must be sheltered or protected, right? So if I'm a fast reader, what I can do at this point is I can go back to that paragraph and look for what people must be protected or sheltered from. Okay? So the truth is, if that people are not protected from themselves by the government, okay? So now I know that the answer is definitely from themselves, because this question is a summary of this paragraph, all right? So that's another way that I can do it, and that's another way I can build confidence that I have the correct answer, right? So if people are not protected from themselves, right? So themselves is D, so I'm going to keep D. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, don't forget, this is not a summary of the whole passage, it's a summary of the American government's role, all right? Okay. All right, everyone. So I'm going to leave the rest of this to you. So 36, 37, 38, 39. Figure that out on your own. Here are the choices. Here's question 40. This is a nice challenge for everybody to work on until tomorrow. Okay, so which of the following phrases best describes the main aim of the reading passage? There are the choices. Answer that on your own, and then when you think you've got the right answers, send them to my email, and I'll give you the answer key with a special discount to our premium package online course. So my email is adrian@aehelp.com, and you can check out our courses and materials at aehelp.com for academic IELTS. That's where this material was from, and gieltshelp.com for general. And I'll give you the answer key. So if you send me your answers, I'll let you know what the correct answers were for those last 5 questions. Keep up the good studies, everyone. Tomorrow I'll have a couple more live IELTS classes for you. You're very welcome, Alex and Rajveer. All right. Barendra, you won't have a passage quite like this one in the general, okay? But your reading section 3 in the general is similar in the format. It just won't be as academic of topic, okay? You're very welcome, Mahi. Very welcome, Irfan. Have a wonderful rest of your day and a great start to your weekend, everyone. Sweet dreams if it's late in your country. Much love to all of you. I'm Adrian, signing out from Budapest for now. Bye.